I appreciate everybody coming out this afternoon in the rain and this terrible weather we're having out there. I parked my car out underneath the solar panels thinking, oh wow, great covered parking. But I guess in between each of the solar panels, the rain still flows through, so I wound up getting soaked on my way in here. But I love to see that. It was, as Jim inferred, when we first started the company in 2010, we had set out to become a solar provider. We set out to set the company up as a solar company. What Jim didn't mention is that Ciel, loosely translated in French, means sky or heavens. So we had actually set out to form a company that installed solar panels for residential customers. The trick was that in 2010 was just after the financial meltdown, and people weren't really thinking about adding new stuff on or getting new stuff. Everybody had sort of recoiled and was really sort of nesting and staying in their house and staying, I like to just call it nesting. So as we started talking to folks about adding solar and doing things like that, they were like, you know what, we're okay. We're really, we've sort of canceled our vacations. We don't even know if the financial system's going to be here next week. We're just gonna sit tight for right now. So with that, we started looking at the existing housing stock in this area and how old and inefficient most of that housing stock is. And at the same time, we stumbled across an incentive program that was virtually nobody had ever heard of, called the New Jersey Home Performance with Energy Star program. And that incentive program is New Jersey's version of a national program that offers folks cash back and financing incentives to make improvements to their home, to make their house more comfortable, to make their house more energy efficient. And we had this service done on our house, as myself and the co-founder at the time, and we weren't very impressed with the end result. So we were both in corporate America at the time, as many of you here being from Honeywell are familiar with corporate. Paychex was another Fortune 500 company, very similar, I'm sure, in scope and culture. But as we sat in our cubicles, we sort of looked at each other and realized there's a business opportunity here. These folks really were not that impressive bringing this service to our home. And we realized that, we might be able to do a better job at this. So as Jim inferred from the beginning of the book, my partner and I, we went out, bought a bunch of equipment, a few trucks, and we got to work. We started insulating houses during the daytime, meeting with customers at night, putting together reports, trying to bring that corporate professional grade product to a retail environment. And that's what spawned all of this. We spent a year getting our certifications, getting the company accredited, doing what we needed to do to become a part of this state program. And then from there, the rest is history. From there, we started meeting with folks. Eventually, we came across a small town in New Jersey called Highland Park. Highland Park had won a grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to become what they call a climate showcase community. The federal government gave these folks $500,000 and said, we want to see you reduce your commercial footprint, your residential footprint, and your municipal footprint. Well, they set right out and they went to work, and the municipal part of it was very easy for them. They could install solar panels, add insulation, upgrade the mechanical equipment. Yes, commercial was very difficult for them. Most of the structures in their town were tenant occupied. So the landlord was absentee. The tenants that were inside those buildings really didn't have much incentive to make improvements to them. And then they had the residential part of this equation. And they wanted to do something more than sort of hand out light bulbs during street fairs. They wanted to really make a meaningful difference. So they put out an RFP, a request for proposal, seeking the services of a company that did energy audits, which is what our company did. We're about a year into this, a year and a half into this, and we quickly had realized that we're just a small company trying to jump up and down and get everybody's attention. Partnering with that municipality to really help promote awareness of this very little known incentive program would be an incredible opportunity for our small company. So we put together a presentation. We competed against a dozen different companies. We were fortunate enough to have won that RFP, and we've won every other RFP that's come out across the state ever since. So that was where we sort of came from. That's a little bit of information sort of about our background. Today we're really here to talk about this incentive program, what potential opportunities there are for you folks to make upgrades to your home. And we're a small group today. I'm sure the rain's probably kept a bunch of people home. please feel free to interrupt me, ask me any questions that you have. If something pops into your mind, I'm sure the person next to you is probably thinking the same thing, so please just go ahead and interrupt me and I'll do my best to hopefully answer those questions for you. So just a little bit about our company. We practice what we preach. We're on the New Jersey Sustainable Business Registry ourselves. Every few years we have to go through a certification process as to that end, tell the Department of Environmental Protection exactly what we're up to and how we're working to be more efficient and more sustainable ourselves. We're a participating provider really of this program, the New Jersey Home Performance with Energy program, and that's what we're going to spend most of our time on today. We've done a tremendous number of these projects. I think we're over, Kevin works with me, about 500 or so retrofits.
About that.
And thousands of home energy audits. So we've spent all of our time here in northern New Jersey. We can tell you almost without even going into your home what's going on inside of your home. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about comfort issues going on inside your house. And we're what's called a BPI Gold Star contractor. That means BPI, the Building Performance Institute. I understand you folks, many of you have an engineering background here. No, a little bit. Okay. We look at the house a little bit differently than most folks do. Most of the time in your home, if something breaks, if a pipe's leaking, you call a plumber. The plumber comes, takes a look at the pipe, and fixes the pipe. If your heating system doesn't come on, you call the plumber or the furnace technician. They come out and they fix your furnace. If you need to add insulation to your home, you call an insulation company and they come and add insulation. But all of these things sort of exist separately. But there's not a lot of tradespeople that take all of this different information into account when they come to your home and they look at the entire scope of what's going on inside your house. As Building Performance Institute accredited contractors, our job is to look at the entire house. How is potentially a small amount of insulation affecting the heating system of the house, perhaps requiring it to be on all the time to try to keep up on a cold day during the winter? Or the opposite in the summer, how is the small amount of insulation working to strain your air conditioning system so that your air conditioning system has to constantly cycle to cool the house during the hot summer days. So they set the standards as to everything that we do. So what is all this? Where did it all come from? It's a joint effort between the Federal Department of Environmental Protection and the U.S. Department of Energy. They came together, realized that the housing stock in this country, particularly on the coasts, is aging, it's very inefficient, and it's nowhere even close to what a new home in these areas is required to be at. So how do we address that from a national standpoint? How do we address this aging housing stock and help people be more comfortable and more energy efficient and reduce our overall consumption of energy that's required to power this aging housing stock? So they got together and created something called Home Performance with Energy Star. It's a derivative of the federal Energy Star program that most of you have probably seen on dishwashers and refrigerators and everything else. They've actually taken it and applied it to older construction. This is an older statistic. We're over 500,000 homes that have engaged this program across the country. And New Jersey adopted its own variation of the Home Performance with Energy Star program. There's 47 different states that have adopted some sort of a different variation of this program. New Jersey's is one of the richest programs in the country. The program in New Jersey is funded by something called the Societal Benefits Charge. Every time you pay a utility bill, if you've ever looked at it really closely, you've seen a line item on there, a few dollars typically each month, called Societal Benefits Charge. That money, when you write the check, gets split off from the rest of your bill and pooled into an account that is specifically for administering energy efficiency programs. There's an organization called New Jersey Clean Energy, njcleanenergy.com. That organization, which is organized by the Board of Public Utilities, is responsible for taking this pool of money and doling it out into different energy efficiency programs. This is one of their programs. They also have programs that they give you money towards subsidizing your lighting, subsidizing high efficiency heating equipment, high efficiency cooling equipment, high efficiency water heaters. There's about a dozen different programs, and I would encourage everybody here in the room, visit that website, see if any of the, because if you're thinking about buying some of this stuff soon, sometime soon, it might make sense for you to see what incentives and what rebates are available to you. But this is one of those programs. But do you have any questions so far? Good? Okay. So, what does this all mean? As a homeowner in New Jersey, the older your home, the more incentives you likely qualify for. If you're here in a new construction home, you probably may not qualify for any incentives. If you do, you may qualify for some of the incentives that are on the left. If you live in a home that predates 1980, maybe something built in the 50s, the 60s, if you live in something like a Victorian turn of the century type house, you'll likely qualify for some of these larger incentives. The incentives vary in type. They're either cashback or financing incentives. If it's a cashback incentive, it's either $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 cashback. If it's a financing incentive, it's either $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 worth of financing. 5 and 10 being zero interest, $15,000 financing being a low interest loan. The $10,000 loan is on a 7-year term. And these incentives are available to anybody that owns a home here in New Jersey. So you don't have to, there's no income qualifications, there's no hoops that you have to jump through. If you engage this process and decide to retrofit your home according to the recommendations that result from this process, these incentives are available to you. The cashback incentives are up to 50% of the price of the work. So if you qualify for a $2,000 incentive, but the work only costs $3,000, well, in that case, you would only receive $1,500 towards that work. You wouldn't essentially receive the full $2,000. But if the work costs $4,000 or more, that $2,000 incentive is yours. You can spread that remaining balance over 7 years by using their $5,000 zero interest loan. So each month, whatever that payment corresponds to, would potentially be offset by a savings in your energy bill. So you've made your old and cold house more comfortable, drawn down on these incentives that are available to you. This isn't a tax credit. This is a check that gets mailed back to you. It's a loan that you begin repaying once the project has been completed. And again, it's available to everybody that owns a home in New Jersey, but nobody's ever heard of it. So that's why I'm here today.
This is for entire home, or let's say I have an old furnace, I want to get a high efficiency furnace. It wouldn't cover that.
Great question.
It covers insulation, everything.
Correct.
That's what you would have to do.
Very much so. So the question is, is this incentive available to just one part of my house that needs to be repaired or replaced? Or do I have to engage the whole house as part of this incentive program, if I understood you correctly? So the answer is that it's a whole house approach. This Home Performance with Energy Stars program is designed to be a whole house approach. They don't want to give you this huge incentive to see you put in a high efficiency heating system into a house that's really old and very leaky and very inefficient to begin with. So regardless of whether it's high efficiency or sort of a traditional unit, it would just be constantly cycling on all the time. Probably isn't going to save much energy because it's just constantly kicking on trying to heat that older house. So as part of this program, they do require that you do a few minimum things. That you insulate one significant area. For most people, that's your attic. Number 2, that you air seal the house, so around windows, in the attic, all your plumbing penetrations, your electrical penetrations, top plates, basically different parts of the construction of your home. They want to make sure that you air seal those parts. And number 3, then you can potentially apply to the remaining towards your heating system or air conditioning system or whatever may be the case.
You said about insulating around your windows. Suppose your audit determines that the windows are so old and inefficient they have to be replaced. Would it include the whole replacement of all the windows?
Great question. So the question was, so if the audit determines that your windows are so old and outdated that they're really contributing significantly to the inefficiency of the home.
Mine, huh?
Yep. So here's the deal. So going back 10 years when this program first started, they used to include windows as part of this program. And the trouble is that windows represent a relatively small proportion of the exterior surface of your home for most people. For most people, it's about 15 to 20%, depending on the house and when it was built. Newer additions have generally a higher percentage associated to windows. So they had a lot of folks and at the time, the incentives were a lot richer. Every year, these incentives sort of go down a little bit. So at the time, it was $10,000 cash back and $10,000 worth of financing that they were just handing out. But a lot of people did exactly that. They took that money and they spent it exclusively replacing their windows. And what was happening was that the program was getting a lot of phone calls following up saying, I'm still freezing. You know, my bills are still high. We haven't really experienced much of a change in our home for this whole house energy efficiency program. We're still freezing, you know? So, and the reason that is because even like the most high efficiency window, triple pane, argon gas, is maybe an R3, or maybe a little bit above, R3.5, versus a single pane window, which is an R1. And you add a storm on that, maybe you get to R1.5. So you're looking at about double what the R value is of a new high-end $2,000 window on 20% of your home. Versus an uninsulated wall, which is about an R4, that when insulated will now be an R13, and cover 80% of the square footage of your home, of the exterior surface of your home. So, and be a lot less expensive to do. So you've gone out and you spent 20 grand, you know, going from an R1 to an R3. R is resistance. If anybody, you know, I'm sorry, I probably should have spent a minute. The greater than the R value, the higher the resistance to the temperature making its way through that surface, through that material. So you've gone out and you spent $20,000 replacing all these windows. You've gone from an R1 to an R3 on 20% of the surface of your home, but you spent $20,000 in the pursuit of that. Now you're in a situation where you have 80% of your home that's still an R4, and you haven't even addressed the attic, which we'll sort of get into as we go through the presentation. And that's, and as a result of that, they took windows out of this program.
Even your complete program.
Even the complete program. So as a result of that, they realized that so many people have that. The window companies have done a great job in marketing. The window companies have made everybody think, when I go to places to speak with people, the first conversation that we have within the first 30 seconds is, oh, I'm so glad I met you, my windows are terrible. You know, and that's immediately what most people think of, because those windows companies have done an amazing job of associating energy efficiency with their product. And it is a more efficient product, there's no question about it. The question is, in the totality of your home, how much of an impact will those windows have? So most of the time, if the window is mechanically sound, and it's not just a single pane window, you know, with poor sealing and all of that stuff, we generally recommend that you leave the windows as is, and the thing you'll see on our report most often is adding insulation to your attic, because as we'll go through in the wintertime, the convective process, the way that the air moves through your home is the vast majority, is where the vast majority of your spend on energy bill goes during the winter months. And we'll get deeper into that, but it's a great question. I appreciate you asking it, because a lot of people have it in their minds that, you know what, either I just got windows, I don't need this program, which, you know, you may be experiencing some of the situations that we spoke about earlier, or that I need windows and I want to pay for them. So that's a good question.
Is there, you talk about the attic, well, let's say the attic's insulated. What do you do in the walls?
So for most homes, the way that we install wall insulation is blown in. The product is generally blown in. So unless you're going through a gut remodel where you've ripped down all the walls, and in that case, maybe spray foam is a better option for you.
Is it fiber, or is it that urea stuff?
It's actually cellulose insulation. So it's ground up newspaper. It's treated with a mineral called borate. What they do is every 16 inches from the outside of your home, in most cases, they drill a 3-inch hole, and they slide a tube up into that hole, connect it to a machine. They turn that machine on, and that machine blows this cellulose insulation product, which compresses inside your wall cavity. So it really does a nice job insulating. And they gradually remove that tube as that cavity fills up. They seal it, and they put your siding back down over that. So ideally, you'll never even know that all took place, but the wall is now very well insulated.
How do you get around the fire breaks and stuff like that?
If there's a lot of fire breaks, like in an older Victorian type home, then we have to drill a lot of holes. It's a lot of work. So it's not easy.
Formaldehyde then?
I'm sorry, I didn't get
You don't use formaldehyde?
No, good question. So we use a premium version of that product that is not treated with formaldehyde or ammonium sulfate, which is also very common. It's treated with a mineral borate. And so it's literally, you know when you go to the deli and you buy a newspaper, there's a lot of newspapers that don't sell that day. Well, they actually collect all those newspapers back up each day, and they bring those to a recycling facility. Those newspapers are ground up along with like paperback books and things like that, and then treated with borate, which has about the same toxicity as salt. It's in the same mineral family, so from a safety hazard standpoint, it has about that same toxicity. So if you eat a lot of salt, obviously it'll affect. Same thing with the insulation.
So borate is just to prevent the fungus and all those kind of things. Right?
To prevent mold and fungi, in addition, flame retardant. So they, when you, the last thing we want to do is, put a flammable product inside the home that, when ignited, will potentially pose a risk to the folks that live in the home. With this, once the newspaper's been treated with this borate mineral, then you can actually put a penny here, what the insulation sales reps like to do when they come around to the office, and the whole staff goes crazy. They grab a clump of it, they put it in the palm of their hand, they put a penny in there, they take a blowtorch, and they melt the penny in their hand with the insulation as the only buffer in between the penny and their skin. It's a very effective demonstration, but that borate is so effective that it prevents that material from igniting.
Well, if it's part of the salt family, is there corrosion that you have to worry about in the nails and any iron?
Good question. It's only treated with a small amount, so that's number one. Number two, in proportion to the other alternatives, like ammonium sulfate, which is like from the ammonia, when it gets wet, it smells like cat pee, and it's a very corrosive.
Problem.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, the borate is less caustic than the salt. So in either application, the largest potential issue comes when that product potentially gets wet. And any insulation product, any building material, wood, cellulose, what have you, is you don't want to have that product get wet. And if it does get wet, just like the wood or any other building product, it would need to sort of be taken out and redone. So if you have like a pipe burst in your wall or something like that, generally you would take the sheetrock down, take out the insulation, and replace that part.
This borate stuff sounds like, I remember these old chemistry sets.
You know,
One of the experiments was to mix something with water and then put it on newspaper, let it dry, and it wouldn't catch on fire.
That's
probably the same thing.
Yeah.
Most people remember too, borax.
Yeah.
Insects don't like it, so used to see it in a lot of insecticide. Actually, Terminex just came out with a line of their own insulation, so that it's insect resistant. They just don't like it. It's not toxic to them, but it's kind of abrasive, so it rubs away on their exoskeleton. So as they crawl through it, they gradually become more frail. So they just tend to shy away from it. Rodents don't like it because, like salt, if you're kind of wading in it, you get sort of thirsty, it dries you out, it pulls a lot of moisture from you. So ironically, those characteristics make it a great alternative for insulating, and it's also hydroscopic, so it absorbs, like on a humid day, it'll absorb moisture at the same rate as the rest of your home. So because ultimately it came from fibers, it's from trees, it has a lot of the same properties as the rest of the construction of your home. So everybody knows, on a humid day, your floors sort of expand, and this expands and contracts at the same rate. So it goes very well inside homes.
also boric acid is not very, it doesn't react very fast with this metal.
Correct.
So you don't have to worry that much as like sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid.
Exactly, yes. Good question. Anybody else? Awesome. All right, so what's the first step? All right, this sounds great, I want to get this money, I have this, that, and the other thing I have in mind at my home, I need to get this stuff all ready to go. What do I do first? What's the first step towards participating in this program? The first step towards participating is to have something called a home energy assessment. Jim actually, his neighbor recently underwent a home energy assessment, so he's able to share some insight on that process. This is a deep dive on your house. If you go, every few years we all need to go to the doctor and get a physical, our blood drawn, a full spectrum lab, test our joints, our reflexes, all that, that's that process for your home. And that's what we do. We send a technician out to your home. They spend about 2.5 to 3 hours in your house. They perform a variety of different tests on the house. They measure exactly how leaky the house is relative to what it should be. So we have a device called a blower door, which is a huge fan that we put in your front door. We depressurize your house to a specific level, and we take into account the square footage and the volume, and this is a lot of what Kevin spends his days doing, and figuring out exactly how leaky your home is relative to an efficient home of the same type and size. And we're able to pinpoint that information. Our folks have thermal imaging cameras, but on a day like this where it's 68, 70 degrees, those same indoor, outdoor temperature, we're not gonna get a lot of use out of those. But on cooler or warmer days, we actually it's almost like X-ray vision for your house. We can see what's going on. We can see whether or not the walls have insulation or need insulation. We can see where the hot or cold spots are. We can tell why that room that you're always so uncomfortable in is always so uncomfortable. So we can really pinpoint each of those different things. We can tell you how leaky or not leaky each room is, and we can tell you exactly where that stuff is coming from. So a lot of folks that think that it's windows, they really learn a lot from the house, because then they begin to see that yes, windows are playing a part, but in many cases it's something that they hadn't even thought of, that's really contributing towards the problem. So it's a really neat process, and you'll likely learn a lot about your home if you decide to undergo this process. But it's a little time consuming, so you want to set aside, half a day for the folks to come out and collect the information. We take that information, about 8 pages worth of data, back to the office where Kevin, who has a background in engineering as well, enters that information into some software that's provided to us by the program. And then we produce something called an assessment report that one of our consultants delivers to you about a week or so after that assessment is completed. And that assessment report summarizes all the findings of the audit and goes through the recommendations, things that are unique to your home, prescriptive recommendations for your home, things that we suggest that you do to the house to make it more efficient. We show you exactly how much the projections are about how much money you'll save on your utility bills going forward if you do these recommendations, and exactly how much an incentive money is available to you to offset that cost. So it's a single shot, one-stop shop. We come out, we assess it, we put all the recommendations together for you, and then we deliver a professional grade report on exactly what the recommendations are and what incentives are available to you to help do that.
What's the cost of that report?
So that's where, when I showed you all those relationships that we have with municipalities and Sustainable Morristown, we offer discounts to folks in those municipalities. So it's a $49 assessment fee, one time, and it can be applied towards the work if you decide to have the work done. If you're outside those municipalities, we have a promotional rate right now of $99. Generally, it's about $250 if you really, sort of shop around and see what the market is for. We use it as a loss leader. It's my belief that most people are skeptical of incentive programs and rebate programs, and we've all gone to Staples and bought the pen and figured out it was the wrong pen, and we spent an hour filling out paperwork to get our $1.50 back because we bought that pen and never wound up getting our $1.50 because for some reason we didn't wind up qualifying for the incentive. We've all been down that road, and as a result, I don't think most people are going to spend $300 to have somebody come to their house and really engage that process at that price point. So one of our sort of theories is to lower that barrier to entry, aggregate it over a larger pool, and try to stay geographically concentrated and as efficient as we can operate to keep those costs down. So we just sort of covered this: data collection, data analysis, review, and consultation. So this software is very sophisticated. It takes into account all of the existing characteristics of your home, and then from there it takes into account what these proposed retrofit recommendations are that we're suggesting, and it literally breaks down that number, that energy consumption number, to give you back exactly what, if you do this work, what the projected savings will be. And they're very conservative with their numbers because obviously they don't want to get a lot of complaint phone calls. Any questions so far? Good. So for most people, the process starts with a home energy audit. This is sort of a timeline of what a typical project looks like in our world. For most people, it starts with a home energy audit. So you have that initial diagnostic visit. You have a follow-up visit with one of our consultants. The consultant's job is to take into account, okay, I want to get my heating system replaced. That was my real main goal as far as calling you guys. But you're telling me I need to do some other stuff. The consultant's role is to balance that, is to say, yep, you have to do some other stuff. Here's really what's going to make the biggest difference in your home. In addition, we can incorporate that heating system, and here's what that entire work scope will look like if you decide to go down this road. From there, we arrange for the upgrades to get installed. Our firm does potentially some of that work. We have other firms that we've partnered with. So depending on what that ultimate work scope looks like, we'll orchestrate that process. We'll perform a confirmation assessment. So part of our role is to validate the work that was done on your home. So I don't know when the last time you had something done on your house was that, the guy that did it came back to validate the work that got done. But as part of this program, our job is to come back and perform a secondary assessment on the house to measure, okay, when we started, your house was 3 times as leaky as it was supposed to be, and now we've got it down to, whatever it is, 1 time as, at the recommended level or somewhere close to it. So we actually pre and post measure both. And then we submit all that paperwork on your behalf so that you don't have to go through the process of filling out that form that's, 15 pages long to get your $1.50 rebate back on your pen. Does that make sense? How am I doing on time?
Well, you're fine on time,
Awesome.
and you're getting the questions as you go along.
Yes.
So that's good. So I think you're right on track.
Awesome. All right, so that all sounds wonderful. So we got it. We need to do the assessment. There's $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 worth of cash available to us. There's $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 worth of financing available for my house. Now, underneath this umbrella, what improvements can be done through this program? Health and safety. A lot of folks that live in newer homes don't really have a lot of these problems. But if you live in a home that was built in 1920, back when they still used asbestos and they still used knob and tube wiring, is another one we tend to see a lot, especially over in Madison. A lot of these houses in Madison are a lot older than maybe here in Whippany or Morris Plains. But part of these funds can go towards remediating some of those safety hazards. So some folks find that they've had an issue in their home for years, and maybe there's a mold buildup. So we can actually take a portion of this money and apply it towards mold remediation. Some folks had their electrical system updated, but the guy forgot to do a few pieces of the electrical system, and they want to get that part of it upgraded as well. The steam heating system that's wrapped with asbestos. We can have an asbestos company come in and remove all that the right way as part of this program. So the last thing that the BPU or the folks that administer this program want to see is us come in and seal up your house real tight and then exacerbate a problem that was naturally occurring on its own. So when we do your assessment, we're also doing a very thorough safety check of the house. We're looking at all of the exposed gas lines to find out if any gas leaks are at those joints. We're looking at your heating system to make sure that, number one, we have a combustion analyzer that's measuring the exhaust to make sure there's not much carbon monoxide in there. Number two, we have a manometer that we're inserting into the exhaust duct to measure the draft pressure of that heating system to make sure that it's going up the chimney the way that it's supposed to. We do the same thing for your water heater. We do the same thing for any combustion appliance that's in your home. We're looking for asbestos and mold and different hazards that may be exacerbated by a project like this. So we want to get an idea of sort of the current state of your home and what our proposal, what effect it's going to have on your house. Does that make sense? Because energy efficient homes act differently. There's not as much of an airflow going through your home, which is good in one sense, but not if it was serving to mitigate, a hazard that was occurring in your house. So we're very careful about looking for those things and identifying those and including that information in the report that we give to you. Insulation. One of the biggest things that happens in your home each winter is that when you turn the heat on, those molecules become energized. And a lot of folks in here who had an engineering background are familiar with this convective process. Others of us, that didn't go to engineering school, sort of understand the convection oven. It's the movement of air as the way that the air moves through your home. Okay, so those molecules, as they become energized, everybody knows that air goes up. Yes, it does, but believe it or not, it goes at a very aggressive rate. If you've ever gone up, if you ever gone up in your attic and you have an old can light in the attic, and you've ever put your head over that can light in the middle of winter, your hair's gonna move. Like, it's that much velocity that's coming up through these older recessed lights and these gaps and these penetrations, these electrical conduits, these plumbing conduits. It's that much energy that's literally forcing its way into your attic and out the attic vents. That's what happens each winter. So a lot of this process is slowing that convective process, is air sealing all those different penetrations, is boxing out each of those recessed lights in your attic, is sealing all those top plates, is trying to keep that heat, that what we call a thermal plane, is trying to keep that heat inside and not allow it to bypass and escape out your vents. Once we've done that, at that point in time, we add insulation on top of that, and that's what gives you the resistance to temperature that will have an effect on keeping that air inside your home. Does that make sense? This is where everybody starts to tune out. This is the science part of it. And then from there, you have the option of adding heating equipment and air conditioning equipment as part of this work scope as well. All of these things collectively, insulation, heating, and air conditioning, and air sealing that's not on here, collectively work to gradually improve the overall efficiency of your house and the overall comfort of your house. Because as we keep that air inside, you gradually go into a room that used to be cold, and now it's not so cold, now it's warm. So it has a practical component to it as well. Right? So if you have any questions about this, or if it's something that you want to do, we've already talked about this website before, njcleanenergy.com. I definitely recommend that you check that out. There are incentives available specifically just to install high-efficiency heating equipment. There are incentives available just to install high-efficiency cooling equipment as well. And I believe Kevin, do you know what the warm advantage and cool advantage subsidies are right now?
Yeah, they vary based on the efficiencies of the system, but they're approximately $500 for heating systems and $300 for cooling systems. Again, that does vary based on efficiencies and SEER ratings for air conditioning.
Okay.
There also are combination water heater, heating system, warm advantage rebates out there. I believe those are up to $700.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the high efficiency furnace put in, and that was a furnace only rebate, and I got more than $300 back.
Nice, okay. So, and a lot of the high efficiency equipment doesn't work the same way as your conventional mechanical equipment does. All of our stuff is in the past, it was atmospherically vented, meaning that you have a little hood over the unit turns on, generates heat, and then that hood hopefully warms up, creates draft, and sucks the exhaust out the chimney. A lot of this stuff works differently these days. You have sort of an additional module that's added on top of your existing unit to capture some of that energy. So instead of being 80% efficient, meaning that 80% of the fuel that it burns is used to heat your home and the other 20% goes up the chimney, we recapture that 20% and distribute it through your home so that only a small amount of energy is lost through the exhaust process. So now you have furnaces and boilers that are 96, 97, 98% efficient versus your conventional atmospheric unit, which is allowing a lot of that energy to simply go up through your chimney and be lost into the atmosphere. So these newer high efficiency systems capture a lot of that energy and extend it through your home rather than just simply allowing it to move through the chimney, if that makes sense. So you also have different hot water systems that are available these days. You have on-demand systems that just fire up when you turn on the hot water, when you call for hot water, causes this system to engage rather than constantly keeping a tank of water in your basement hot for if and when you decide to use it at some point down the road. So there's been a lot of advances in the area of these different systems, and you know, it's something that's for a lot of people can be worthwhile to check out, and that these incentives can be used for.
Talking about that hot water system, that's similar to the old steam boilers or hot water boilers. You had the coil in the furnace, but they were notorious for running out of hot water, you know. Have they improved that with the new stuff?
It's a great question. With the new stuff, it depends upon the unit. So if you have an on-demand unit, as we were just discussing, that unit fires probably 50 times the BTUs of a conventional hot water heater all at once to warm water immediately when you call for it. So those units are very effective, and it's almost unlimited how much hot water you can get from them, because there's a massive burner system kicking on all at once, setting a tremendous amount of energy to heat that water right away just when you call for it. So that system you don't see as much. The only time you see that is if you're filling up like a jacuzzi tub, you know, maybe it might be cooler towards the end of that. But in general, that type of system is very effective and efficient. There's another type of hot water system called
Indirect tanks.
Yeah, where you have a coil that goes through water that's part of your heating system, and as it makes its way through there, you may find that you run out of water. It's almost the same system as you described, but
They're more efficient these days because they insulate the tanks better now. So they actually have a small storage tank. They're probably about 30 or 40 gallons. And they're insulated with 2 inches of foam, so they hold the temperature a lot better, and they don't kick your boiler on as often as the old systems used to.
do you know if there's a limitation on how much water you can pull out of that type of system before it starts to turn cold?
Yeah, it's how big the storage tank is, so
Yeah.
30 or 40 gallons.
Well, the issue is, does it withstand the daughter test, taking the shower?
I have 2 of them. I can appreciate
You
what
know
you're
what
talking
I'm
about.
talking about.
I do. And it's 45 minutes later, you're still in the shower. Wait a minute. I know there's no hot water left in there.
I know there is a new thermostat now for each individual vent. Somebody has it, so you know you can control each room separately. Now, is it comes part of this thing or no?
Building.
Yes, that can as part of the heat, as part of a new heating system. Yes, that can be included, but you can't add them to existing heating systems.
This costs almost $3,000 for
Right.
the average home, I think. You know.
Right.
But it individually, you can just dial it and it will do it, each room separately.
Wow. I've heard Honeywell makes a great thermostat.
No, but this is not Honeywell.
I know.
Pitching Honeywell to Honeywell, huh?
This is the outside company in Boston doing it.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's a very nice system.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a really good, I was thinking about that. In fact, I think I proposed it once at Honeywell, but it didn't go anywhere.
Building controls on the commercial side are taking off like crazy. You
Yes,
see
that's
it?
what he does right now.
Okay.
The guy, you know, mostly it's commercial.
Yep.
Nobody wants to put $3,000 for the thermostats in the house.
Exactly. So that we see, like the control business is from lighting. Like all of our lights have motion sensors. So if we sit still for 3 hours, the lights turn off on us. You know, it's we have independent thermostats in each of our office rooms as well. But we're not at that point with residential. I think as the cost comes down, as Honeywell engineers spend more time and effort and bring us those products at a more affordable rate, we'll start to see some of that in the home as well. It would be nice. It would be fantastic. I would love to see that. Anyone else?
Honeywell is going to spin off that unit.
Pardon me?
So they're not going to be there.
Pardon?
Honeywell is spinning off the home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're gonna sell it off.
Oh,
And
it's
it's
spinning off.
and it's somehow disabled
What?
It's selling the
projector.
It's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
go
Get a
from
scheme.
$42 million company to 29.
They know.
I was going to show the pictures.
Yeah.
They don't
That's right there.
not move,
Yeah.
who am I to say?
There we go. Okay, we're gonna get a little bird's eye view of an audit here.
So Jim was kind enough to take some.
No, click slide show.
There we go.
So as I mentioned before, Jim's neighbor actually coincidentally had one of these assessments done as we were discussing my being here today. And I think, correct me, did you know that they were coming, or did you see the?
No, she called me out and said, I said I wanted to see it. We talk all the time.
Oh, okay.
So, and she's getting her report now from Natalie.
Awesome.
So she's not here tonight.
Awesome. So they were kind enough to take some photographs of the process. So, and a lot of it is like what we were discussing before. This device that she's using here is measuring the combustion gases and measuring how much carbon monoxide is inside that gas. So if the systems, and most of you probably know this, but carbon monoxide is the byproduct of inefficient combustion. So if there's something wrong with the unit and it's not burning efficiently and evenly, it will put out elevated levels of carbon monoxide. Our job is to spot that issue and let you know if there's some sort of an issue with the combustion system that's causing this unit to not burn efficiently. Most of the time when we test your heating system, the results are what you'd expect them to be. Very low levels of carbon monoxide, particularly when we're looking at a well-maintained system. But some folks, time goes by and you sort of forget the maintenance calls and stuff like that. And over time, soot and issues with the combustion process can arise inside of your unit, which normally is not a big deal because it's going to exhaust out the chimney. But if you have a squirrel that falls down there, if you have a bird that falls down there, if you have leaves that have somehow made their way down there, there's oftentimes the opportunity for a chimney to get blocked, in which case now these two issues working together are potentially life-threatening. So our job is to make sure that everything is working the way that it's supposed to. The next step after she's measured this, the carbon monoxide levels in the exhaust, is she's going to measure the draft pressure in there and make sure there's negative pressure in there so that air is being drawn up and out the chimney rather than positive pressure, which would mean that there's some sort of a blockage and the air is coming back down and backdrafting into the home. So she's doing this is all part of her safety tests.
And when I had my furnace replaced, there were 4 petrified birds in there.
No kidding.
4. And
Wow.
I'm assuming it happened before I put the chimney cap on my chimney. I don't know.
Wow. It's not infrequently that we find stuff like that. Happens more often than you would think that it does.
And my son had 2 live squirrels. I didn't go there. We took the flue off and got them. I had to help them get them out and into a trap.
Oh my
We
gosh.
heard rustling in the chimney area.
Ooh.
Whoa!
So, and it happens. These are warm areas, and in the wintertime, these animals are attracted to these warmer areas. And if you see how many different pitches and curves and stuff like that are happening here, that's not a bad place to live if they can find a way in or out. And sometimes
they go up on the chimney to get warm and they pass out.
there you go.
I had a situation came home from a long weekend. My rec room looked like it had been ransacked. Curtains off the window, the papers, I was about to call the police. We had a fish tank at the time. I looked in the fish tank, and when these half covers on it, so the filled in.
Sure.
I see a blackbird, big blackbird, floating in there dead.
A blackbird?
He apparently, that's when I put the chimney cap on. He
Wow.
apparently passed out, went down the chimney, woke up, got out from that opening at the bottom, and was trying to get out of the rec room. And he wouldn't believe the mess one bird could make of a room. I was ready to call the police before I saw it. I thought maybe somebody broke in and ransacked the room.
Amazing. Amazing.
And then he got hungry, he went in for the fish, and he couldn't back out, he drowned.
Wow. What a story. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Try a raccoon, same result.
Wow. So it happens, as you can see. We've had a couple of examples right here. It does happen. So, and if everything's functioning fine, then it's not the end of the world. Everybody's going to be okay. But it's as these things happen, sort of almost like a domino effect, where you have one issue and that's being exacerbated by another issue.
And what do you do about the fireplace? Because those are the most inefficient place in the house.
Good point. A lot of people don't realize that. The point was that the fireplace is often one of the most inefficient things in your home, and it very much is. We've talked about this convective process. Well, you're essentially installing a vacuum that's going to suck all of the hot air right out of your home and right up the chimney. So some folks install a blower motor underneath their fireplace to try to offset some of that, and those can help. But essentially, it is just that. It is a vacuum that sucks all of the heat out of the rest of your house and right up the chimney. What do we do about them? Folks like them. They appreciate the ambiance, and they enjoy having them in their home. Our advice is when they're not being used, the damper, making sure that that's closed, really closed. A lot of people, it's fine, but it's not fine. It's literally like leaving the window open. It's almost worse than leaving the window open a half an inch. If that damper's open, it's just going to suck all of the warm air right out of your house. So making sure that the damper is fully closed. If your damper's broken, there are chimney balloons, things that you can put in that area that will expand to stop the air from making its way up and out the chimney. But in general, fireplaces are horribly inefficient. Horribly inefficient. Good point. If you're looking at some, options, doing like a pellet stove or some of these sealed units are much more beneficial.
I have an old Victorian house, and the chimney has a damper in the fireplace. And I was going to put in a gas thing, but they were going to put something on the damper that kept the damper open so that the combustion gases would go up and you wouldn't close the damper. And I just said, no, I didn't think that was what I wanted to do, because, and I certainly didn't want to open the damper every time
Smart move.
you turn the thing on. So
Smart move.
never use it.
Yeah. They also have these ventless units that they have out there that, okay, natural gas doesn't put off a ton of carbon monoxide if it's burning properly, but it does put off a ton of moisture, and there are a lot of other byproducts that come out of that combustion process that, they want to sell you a unit.
The only
Yeah.
thing, the romantic thing goes away, I guess. It's not romantic anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
When everybody's lying around. So this device is the device that we use to measure how much air infiltration is coming through your home. So everybody knows that a house should breathe. Absolutely, yes, 100%. Inside your home, about 35% of the air that's inside should exchange to the outdoors every hour. That's the ideal breathing rate for your home. So most homes in this area, it's about 100% of the air that's inside your home is exchanging to the outside each hour, which gives us fresh air, but there's two problems with that. One is that the heating system or the air conditioning system has to turn on to recondition all of the air that's escaped your home during that hour. The other downside is that we've talked about sort of the convective process, which is the air that's escaping out through your attic, but as it's escaping through your attic, the makeup air, the replacement air, is coming in from the lower levels of your home. So along your rim joist, along the foundation of your home, generally up through your basement and up into the living space and then out the attic. That's the natural progression of air through your home. That's what happens. Like this winter, as the temperature cools, stand above your attic hatch and feel how much warm air is going by you, and you'll begin to appreciate the magnitude of this conversation. Or open your attic door and stand in front of the walk-up attic, and you'll feel the air. Your hair will move. You'll feel the tingle. You'll feel the wind, and that's the convective process. So all this replacement air is coming from the lower levels of your home through your basement, and generally not really the air that we want to be breathing. If you think about your basement, it's kind of damp, it's kind of musty, maybe a little mold or mildew down there, just from the time that it flooded or what have you. It's just not where we want to have that air coming from. So by slowing that rate, by slowing the air movement through your home, you slow the convective process, and you actually wind up improving the air quality in many cases indoors in your home. So this device is connected to a manometer that's in her hand, and she's measuring the indoor air pressure as it relates to the outdoors. She's setting this fan to a specific speed, that 50 pascals, so that she's measuring how much air infiltration is coming through the house. And she can pinpoint, when we get the data back to Kevin, exactly how leaky this home is, and we present that information to you in the report that we make as part of your home energy assessment process.
And you pinpoint where the leaks are from bad to
Yeah.
less bad.
That's that's the cool thing, the practical side of this, is now you can walk around the house, feel underneath all your windows. Oh, okay. Well, it wasn't my window this whole time. It was actually this half-inch gap that's under here, where the guys that put the window in didn't use spray foam, and it totally makes sense. All this time I thought it was the window, but it's really here. Or in the old Victorian house you mentioned, along the baseboards. When you open your basement door, you're gonna feel like a wind tunnel, because that where the house meets the foundation, a lot of times there's a lot of gaps along that part of the house. So yes, you're gonna realize, you're gonna be able to pinpoint all of that with your hands. And we also, if there's a temperature difference to the outdoors, we also have thermal imaging that we can use as well to help with that effort. But yeah, so she's doing it here on Jim's neighbor's home.
Yeah, and we saw that in this case, because there was pipes that were open to the attic in one of the bathrooms, and you just put your hand up there, and it was a breeze.
Yeah. This device simulates a 20-mile-an-hour wind hitting the house from all sides at the same time. So it's literally, you'll be able to walk around and you won't have any trouble identifying. You'll stand at the base of your staircase to the upstairs and you'll feel like the wind coming down on you. So, and if we did this in a perfectly efficient home, there would be no reading and there would be no air movement. We wouldn't feel anything different. You follow me? So this is directly proportional to the amount of air infiltration that exists inside your home. And this is an example of the thermal imaging that I was talking about. Thermal imaging shows us temperature and color. So the darker the spots, the colder they are, the lighter the spots, the warmer they are. And in this case, where that arrow, where that pointer is 64 degrees, and this is the scale of these different colors. So we're able to really pinpoint, and you can see here that this plate is showing up here as a warmer object in color. But what we were just talking about that gap here, that area over the ledge is showing up as a colder area. So you can actually visualize what's happening in that instance. So we have the blower door running, the air is getting pulled through there, and it's coming up as darker imaging on the thermal camera.
And why was the air going through the upper part then?
It looks like there's a gap in behind this ledge here.
Behind that?
Yep. And that's, as the blower door is running, it's pulling the air up through there. Make sense? There's the family dog. In temperature, in heat.
Dog's nose is cold.
So, but that's all the pictures that we have from, and that's just a random audit. That was just we didn't put these pictures together special just for this presentation. Jim actually had those from when he participated in the audit, the assessment of his neighbor's home. So he emailed me and asked me if we could put those in the presentation. But thank you all very much for the time. I really appreciate you all being here. Hopefully I didn't go too over on the allotted
No,
amount of time.
that was fine. The questions were just great. So thank you very much, Scott. This is really